Phil, you spoke to the Premier. She certainly ramped things up. I mean, she's talking about essentially whether or not state leaders are even considering themselves part of Australia at the moment.
Hi, Tom. Yes, it was part of a webcast thing we did with the Premier and the Lord Mayor of Melbourne for the AFR for an annual leadership prize we're now awarding. And the Premier was pretty candid, actually. I mean, she's annoyed. I mean, New South Wales, I should say, is carrying the bulk of the country at the moment in terms of generating economic activity and, quarantining people coming from overseas and all sorts. And she basically said the Premier felt some of her colleagues, not Andrews, because he's got his own set of problems down there, but we're playing politics by keeping their borders closed unnecessarily. She doesn't think they've got the balance right between the health and the economic concerns. And she had a fairly pointed line, they'll share the spoils of federation when it comes to taking GST revenue and other revenues, which they disproportionately collect, but they're not prepared to sort of do their other part. And, she was quite annoyed. New South Wales, I think, had one case last Friday, of a community transmission, and people were still shutting its borders. It wasn't just Queensland. You could lump Tasmania, West Australia, South Australia into that category for shutting out New South Wales. So she was quite animated.
So when you look as well, I found this interesting. Last week we had unemployment figures out. We had a lot of crowing from the Labor side saying, well, look, hard borders. We can see the most improved states in these measures, the states that have the biggest gains in employment, WA, South Australia, Tasmania and the Northern Territory. At the same time, what we got the next day was states most dependent on JobKeeper, which also feeds into those same unemployment figures, the same states. And this is the quandary for the federal government. They're propping up a lot of these states and helping out and helping them to have policies the federal government abhors.
Yeah, Tom, look, and I think, it's just obvious that when you do open up, when you can open up, it's going to generate more economic activity and more jobs. So whatever happened the other day with those numbers would only be accentuated if you did open up. But as you say, if you do take away the job subsidy, it's even more important to open up your economy so employers can start afford paying wages again and hiring people. I mean, I just take our own experience last week. I'm an Adelaidean, Tom. The old motto, we do anything for the place but live there. There's thousands of South Australian expats on this side of the country. And when the ACT opened up to Adelaide last week, I know a lot of people who jumped online and bought flights straight away to go back and see parents and friends and so forth. So it just shows, you open them up and people will travel again. It means Qantas is flying more. People are working again. And it's, no one in this argument is saying do it, where there's a risk. No one is saying put people at risk. No one normal, no one sensible. But it's just that the frustration of the Premier of New South Wales and others when there's no clear health risk and there's no clear balance being, given to the economic downsides of shutting down an entire state because they've got one case.
Yeah, I tell you what, some of those airfares, though, are eye-watering, so we'll see how many, maybe some more planes will get up in the air.
Tell me about it.
Just finally, I wanted to ask you about energy, gas were the headlines. I guess the crucial question is, will this work? Is it a good idea to potentially lock in gas as a transition fuel on both the issue of emissions but also price?
Well, Tom, on price, if the government's going to intervene as much as it said it would last week and to sort of flood the East Coast with cheap gas, then yes, because it will be cheap. And look, this is what's happening in the United States. They're getting domestic gas out of the ground. They're flooding the market. They're driving down the costs, not just of living and of manufacturing, and it's all to this sort of post-COVID self-reliance, making things here again type policy. So that's the non-environmental side of it. Obviously, gas is cleaner than coal, but not a great deal. So it doesn't really push the climate change button. But I think you can safely say we're still at the stage where you can't just rush straight to wind and solar and other renewables because you just won't have the capacity to run everything all the time. So there's got to be some firming fuel, there's got to be some backup fuel, and you can argue how long you need that. That depends on the evolution of batteries and other renewable technology. But I don't think you can say you can't have it, not in the short to medium term at least.